Gulf Oil concerning numerous violations of Connecticut's environmental protection laws at its New Haven petroleum distribution facility right behind me here. So, I don't have to tell you, it's a gorgeous day here on Long Island Sound here in New Haven. It's beautiful, Mayor. This building is beautiful. This building was built and strengthened and refurbished to be more resilient in the face of a changing climate. And so it's a great example of environmental stewardship and making sure that we do everything we can to protect our natural resources and the people that live here. It would be far from an overstatement to say that Long Island Sound and the rivers and streams that pour into it are our most vital natural resource and frankly, our state's environmental treasure. And all of us, we don't just depend on it as part of our economy or for recreation. It is the lifeblood of so many people, including the people that live right here. And that's why this settlement is important, because people live here. So, you know, as you may know, I'm a fisherman, so the sound matters to me. This is the beginning, I think, when you start going north on 95 of our state's premier oyster fishery, you know, which we supply, which we use to supply oysters across the country and across the globe. The economy, of course, we have boating, we have shipping, and of course the residential communities around depend on this sound. And when it's under attack, when it's under threat by misconduct and violations of the law, we will take action to stop people from doing that. And so this settlement today resolves claims by the state of Connecticut against Pike Fuels, formerly Gulf Oil, which operated this terminal from 1988 to 2024. And Gulf went to Pike, which now is owned by Global. And during that time, going as far back as 2019, based on our investigation, which was led by Deep, and we'll hear from the commissioner in a second, we discovered that Gulf and Pike falsified records, failed to report, and failed to comply with Connecticut law on a host of issues. They falsified records. They provided inaccurate emissions reporting. They failed to conduct required equipment inspections. They failed to report changes to their storage tanks. They constructed a new tank without a permit. They failed to do proper and adequate leak detection, which is shocking. And they conducted demolition without inspecting for asbestos-containing materials. Let me tell you what all that means. So when you have a set of big storage tanks, these storage tanks store gasoline, a liquid. And when you store gasoline in these tanks, gases build up that have volatile organic compounds in them. And you have to manage those gases safely. If you don't manage those gases safely and they're discharged in an unsafe manner or they leak, VOCs and contaminants and particulates end up in the air and people breathe it. And in some cases, that ends up in the water and people drink it. And if you store gasoline in a big tank like that and you don't check for leaks, obviously you risk something even more catastrophic, which is a liquid leak into the sound. And so that's why it was so important to come down hard on Gulf Oil and Pike Fuels in cooperation with Deep to make sure that we hold not just Gulf and Pike accountable, but that everybody else gets the message that we take these rules very seriously. And we take our obligation to enforce the law and protect these communities very seriously. Let me just close by saying, before I turn it over to the commissioner, at the end of the day, this is about technical violations of the law, yes. It's about the technical management of gases and liquid gasoline at this terminal. It's mostly about New Haven and East Haven and the people that live here. It's about It's about the families that live here, okay, and here, and on the other side of those tanks. And those are the people that bear the brunt of this, that bear this burden. And if we contaminate the air that they breathe and the water that they drink and make them unsafe, that's not just morally wrong. It does tremendous damage to those communities and those families. And that's what this is about. This isn't just about environmental law. It's not about regulations. It's about keeping people safe. It's about public safety. And the $2 million that we recover, some will go to fines and penalties, but a lot of that money will go to remediation and restoring our environment and keeping people safe. I want to thank the folks in my office, Dan Salton and Matt Levine, and our team. I want to thank the Commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Katie Dykes, the Mayor, Justin Elicker, for his partnership always. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. I'm Katie Dykes, Commissioner at Connecticut Deep, and I'm pleased to be here today to be part of this announcement of this significant settlement. This was the result of a really important investigative and enforcement action undertaken by the agency. And of course, anytime we're in the enforcement posture like this, our strong partnership with the Attorney General's office and frankly, your commitment to protecting the citizens and the public health of our communities here in Connecticut, Attorney General, is critical. I just want to say this is a moment, obviously, in our country where there's a lot of debate going on about what's the purpose of our environmental laws, what's the purpose of our regulatory agencies, and the various bureaucracies that have been developed over time, and even the fundamental laws that have been put in place around environmental protection. But what we're talking about here is the result of all of that structure that we have in place here in Connecticut. These violations were discovered during a routine inspection that was conducted by our Deep Air Bureau staff in 2021. Most of it, we have done a whole lot of work across our state in our air program and all of our environmental programs to help streamline the permitting process and support compliance assistance for a lot of the regulated companies in our state. And by and large, we live in a state where regulated businesses are good neighbors who take environmental stewardship and their compliance obligations seriously and make it part of their business practice. But these violations that we discovered through this inspection conducted by our staff are completely out of the bound. Gulf Oil's pattern of falsification of records threatened to undermine Deep's ability to monitor compliance at the New Haven bulk terminal, and they compromised Deep's efforts to protect public health and the environment as we've been charged to do. We are, anytime, I think the message that I just want to share is that this is part of the routine work that Deep staff are able to do with the support of funding from the state and from the federal government. Conducting these inspections is something that we're doing every day to help provide assurance that the businesses that are responsible for these regulations are actually implementing them. And when we see that those regulations are being completely flaunted and ignored willfully by a company, then we are going to take these actions, and that's because we have these structures in place. Why is this important to everyday people? It's because the volatile organic compounds that have leaked out of this facility are affecting the health of kids and families, the citizens in this community here in New Haven. New Haven is the host to a significant amount of critical energy infrastructure, and these storage tanks that are storing gasoline and other fossil fuels, not just for New Haven, but for the entire region that depends on having shipments through this location. But New Haven citizens should not be bearing the disproportionate burden in terms of their public health and their air quality of being the host of that energy infrastructure. And that's why Deep's role in this inspection and enforcement is something that I'm so personally passionate about, and that our staff are so committed to. New Haven is a community like Bridgeport, like Hartford, that unfortunately have levels of air quality and air pollution and respiratory illnesses that go along with that are just too high. These cities are at the top, on the top 100 cities in the country where it's most difficult to live with asthma and respiratory illness. And that's because we're impacted by a lot of air pollution that's coming in from upwind states, from traffic in the New York metro area, from fossil fuel power plants in the Midwest. That coupled with the transportation pollution from our interstates here adds to the public health burden that our cities are experiencing. And when you compound that with these kinds of leaks that are happening at this company, at this Gulf oil facility, it is just a completely inequitable and intolerable burden that communities have had to bear. I'll just note that with a combined population of just over 650,000, the state's 5 largest cities, Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, and Waterbury, represent only 18% of Connecticut's total population, but they account for nearly half of the $119 million in asthma total health care charges that folks are experiencing every year. So this is hitting people in their pocketbooks. It's making it difficult for kids to get to school, for families, for people to be able to get to work when you're struggling with an asthma attack, and it all tracks back to air pollution that is addressable. And that's what we do every day at DEEP. We're proud again through our programs that we have a good track record of compliance. But when we find situations like this with Gulf Oil, where there's a company that is completely ignoring its responsibilities, we take action, and we do so with the strong partnership from the Attorney General's office. And we're able to do that because of Connecticut's longstanding and bipartisan support to having a strong regulatory structure to protect air quality in our state. This settlement includes $1.2 million in civil penalties, plus $800,000 that will support environmental projects in New Haven and across the state of Connecticut. We're really proud to be a part of this, and to let you know, Mayor Elicker, and to the community here in New Haven, that we have your back, and that we'll continue to ensure compliance with these important standards to protect communities like this one.
Thank you, Commissioner Dykes, and thank you, Attorney General Tong. It's good to be here with everyone this morning. And as the Attorney General said, it is a beautiful day that captures just how much the New Haven Harbor is an asset for our community. And when you think about just how many people use this corridor for their recreation, to walk outside for their education, we have the Sound School that is right down about a 10-minute walk from here, where young high school students are educating themselves on the environment and out in the water oftentimes many days each week. We have UNH that is just downstairs, just recently moved in downstairs, that is working to educate themselves on how to address a lot of the challenges around climate change that are impacting our environment. The city's putting, in partnership with our federal partners and state partners, $200 million of investment along this corridor, over $200 million, to ensure that there's coastal resiliency with a living shoreline, an additional $12 million to entirely revamp Long Wharf Park. There is so much activity in this corridor that is human-centric, but also it is a critical environmental asset for our city as well, and our region, and it is an important economic asset. The Attorney General mentioned the oyster industry, but the port is a very, very important economic asset as well. And I think that it's important to underscore that these things can live in harmony, that economic activity, a vibrant port, can live in harmony with the environment and with people living nearby, as long as people follow the law. And why we're here today is that people not only didn't follow the law, but they willfully chose to cover up their actions to disobey the law. And the importance of today is not about the dollars, but the dollars are important to help undo some of the wrongs. But the importance today is to make an example of a company, to show that when other companies decide to disobey the law, they will be held accountable, and that at the city level, at the state level, we will do everything possible to ensure that, in fairness to your competitors out there, in addition to in fairness to our community and the environment, you will be held accountable when you disobey the law. I want to underscore our gratefulness to both Commissioner Dykes and Attorney General Tong for their support of the city in so many different ways. I mean, Attorney General Tong last week was fighting for reproductive rights, yesterday was fighting for immigration rights, today is fighting for environmental rights, and Commissioner Dykes has been such an incredible partner with us in so many different ways, whether it's the work along with the Attorney General on English Station and accountability there, and a lot of other environmental initiatives. So, you know, as we, I think, walk forward into federally what will be quite a challenging environment, in my view, a strong lack of leadership on environmental issues. It heartens me to know that our state leaders are standing side by side with us to ensure that we live in an environment where we treasure our assets and treasure the health of our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Questions?
I guess a question about a few details of the wrongdoings you found in the settlement. So how many oil tanks did you find that Pike owns locally where these violations took place? And could someone confirm, was there an actual leak, or was this is a matter of falsification of reports?
I think it was largely a matter of falsification of records.
So there was no liquid leak into the...
You know what? The problem is we don't know. We can't tell because they didn't send us the information that they're supposed to send us. That's why these reports are so important. And leak detection is facilitated, enabled by reporting. And if we don't get accurate, let me tell you what happened here. They took forms and literally whited out from previous years information, and then you know, using a pen or something, doctored up the forms. That's how obvious it was and brazen it was. And so if they do that and they conceal the truth about what's happening, it's hard for us regulators to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, so just speaking to that, so of the 24 months of leak log records that we inspected from 2019 to 2020, records from 21 of those months contained clear signs of fabrication, literally dates that were whited out, resulting in nonsensical data, mismatched signatures, and other inconsistencies and discrepancies. We did not document or allege any excess emissions or excess exposure in relation to this particular inspection, although we did issue an administrative consent order in 2019 for leaks at this terminal. But the predominant enforcement focus here was on the falsification, and again, to send that signal to all of those companies that are out there that we're carefully looking at this. Proper documentation, accurate documentation is critical for us to be able to detect any emissions leakage that's occurring.
So to be fair, I think that's an important distinction. Thank you for the question. We do work on cases where there are spills and there are leaks. We have a huge gasoline spill case that we're working on, which is maybe the worst in state history. That's not what we're talking about here. So people do not need to be alarmed. But what is really important is that we hold people accountable and hold their feet to the fire so as to avoid something very harmful and catastrophic. And if people doctor up reports and white out, you know, last year's information and submit false records, that puts people at risk.
And how many oil tanks are we talking about?
I don't actually have that number. I don't have it. Across the facility.
I guess the question is, how will the state kind of ensure that they remain in compliance in the future and don't, you know, continue to perhaps violate laws in other ways?
We're going to stay on top of them, but as the commissioner said, this came up in routine testing, right? And inspections. And that's why it's so important that we have staff, resources, regulations, that DEEP has the horsepower to do its job. And, you know, nationally, there's this debate, I guess you would call it a debate, about dismantling our nation's regulatory infrastructure and hollowing out the EPA. If you do that writ large, we don't do stuff like this. Okay, now we'll always do stuff like this, but the attack on our nation's regulatory system and infrastructure imperils all of this work that we need to do to keep people safe.
I'll say roughly 1/5 of DEEP's budget for personnel and base programs derives from federally delegated funding. So not specific to this program per se, but across the diverse range of different programs that DEEP implements. Those federal appropriations are critical to many of the core environmental compliance and enforcement and permitting programs that we implement on behalf of the state. I also want to note that, again, this funding that is resulting from the settlement is something that we're proud that we've designed and negotiated a settlement that will enhance the access of the community to more information about the level of emissions that they're experiencing, the level of air pollution. The funding includes about $700,000 that will go into what we call a state environmental programs funding, and that includes $400,000 to support access to community air quality monitoring systems. And so that's obviously, those are air quality monitors that are serve a sort of an educational purpose. We deploy them at schools and in communities to help communities get more information about air quality so that they can take action and understand what they can do to help try to stay safe, as well as where those emissions are coming from. And that's augmenting, of course, the enforcement grade monitoring that DEEP implements across the state.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, everybody.